zero.
together, making sure to keep our eyes on the prize.
We're
But
not.
also,
Can you do
sometimes
whatever the
just
f you want,
relaxing.
Morty? Wait. What the f?
Hey guys, I wanted to do something different today. Rather than doing a full season review or mini season review of Rick and Morty, all the season 4 episodes we have so far, I wanted to do a tier list. I'm here today with a good friend of mine, Dan the Man.
Hi, I'm Dan. I'm from the Dan the Man Show. It's a channel on YouTube. I make videos about games, countdowns of games. I also run the Adult Swim Out of Context Twitter page. Check me out on either one, and I'm looking forward to doing this.
What is your least favorite episode of these 5?
Well, if I had to pick a least favorite episode, I would probably say that the first episode of season 4, Edge of Tomorty, Rick Die Repeat, is my least favorite of the season so far.
Would you please accompany me to Forbodulon Prime for death crystals?
Well, thank you for asking. Yes, I will do that.
Let me go over the good stuff first, because I feel like that's important in order to understand the bad stuff. I really enjoyed Rick's subplot. You know, after the whole thing where in the very beginning, like after the first 5 minutes after he dies, when Morty flies the ship into the rock, killing
Coming
Rick.
back into different dimensions.
Yeah. I really enjoyed that subplot a lot. It was funny. It was random. The whole fascist element of it, it kind of turned into a running gag, but it was funny enough that it kept making me laugh because it became the norm.
What's the matter with you? You don't talk? Tarantula got your tongue? Hail Wasp Hitler?
And then the one reality where they're not fascists, they're wasps, which are one of the most unlikable, unfriendly, deadly creatures on the planet, and they're just bonding together over a family meal. I don't know why that cracks me up so much, but it does. Now we have to get to the bad stuff. The stem of the bad stuff definitely stems from the Morty subplot, in which Morty, once discovering what a death crystal is, he holds on to one and lets it guide his life so that he can have this one certain life where he dies an old man with Jessica by his side. And that's all the context we're given. And that's important because at the end of the episode that comes back, the death crystal basically guides Morty this entire episode. And he's acting like a jerk throughout a lot of the episode.
I see you appear to be holding a death crystal that's guiding your decisions more than I am. That's your right. I just want to remind you that some people can't hold anything and can never die. So that's a little offensive to me. Oh, okay.
And I'm not a huge fan of Morty when he's acting like a jerk. Prime Rick and Morty comes when you have Rick acting like the jerk and Morty acting like this, oh, what's going on? What are we doing? I'll go along with it, but I'm still confused kind of thing.
Very naive and curious.
Yeah, very naive and curious. And there's a lot of pacing issues in this episode with the Morty subplot, specifically in regards to the court scene, the interview scene. I understand what they were going for, but it doesn't mean I like it. It just kind of dragged on.
So, what are we doing?
Stop asking questions. Stop doing meta commentary. Just have fun.
We're going to be starting this off in agreement. My 5th least favorite episode is also Edge of Tomorty. When people started to actually start talking about Rick and Morty in a casual fashion, for me, I started to hear about it a lot around mid-season 2, season 3. And one thing I enjoyed about the first 2 seasons of Rick and Morty is that it didn't feel like another just raunchy comedy sort of Adult Swim or just adult animated show. It actually had different things that I went to explore, whether it's through its philosophy or through the sci-fi elements or just the family dynamic that you don't see in any other show. When I got into season 3, one problem that I had with it is that I felt like the voice it had switched, and it was something that didn't necessarily appeal to me, but it appealed to a lot of people.
I take a Rick! What beloved dum-dum!
Putting the fan base stuff aside, I just personally felt like season 1 and 2 kind of spoke to what I liked in Rick and Morty a lot better. So when we get over to this episode, Edge of Tomorty, while it did have a plot in it, I also didn't like the Morty subplot, and while it was, in addition to the fact that Morty just kind of seemed like a jerk all throughout it, part of it just had to do with the logistics of it. It seems like this episode is trying to tell me that there's only one way that Morty can die, and be with Jessica, not Jennifer like I said in that video, but Jessica. There would be different ways that Morty can be with Jessica, or die with Jessica right now, within a week, within a month, and not have to turn down Jessica right then and there, which was one of my least favorite parts. But I also didn't like Hologram Rick because, to me, I personally felt like it was more pandering towards portraying SJWs in such a light where, you know, you can look at it and go, all of the identity jokes. While I personally think that both sides can be a little unfunny with the way that they portray the other side. The reason why I didn't like these is because these identity jokes were really too late, especially considering that there was a long hiatus between season 3 and season 4, and that's the reason why I wanted to start with that, because when you're leaving season 3 and you're someone who has the same opinion as I do, where you personally feel like it was kind of but you are so excited and you are so proud to be a Rick and Morty fan, you want season 4 to come back with good episodes.
Stop planning your own death and talk to whoever you want.
Now you just sound like real Rick.
You're better than that language, Morty.
I ain't better than shit, Jack.
So this was not only disappointing to me, but it was a little bit disheartening because it made me worry about if Rick and Morty is going to become that show that is just going to be using certain jokes and pandering to certain people without actually making these characters substantial, especially because, again, towards the end, like what you said, that whole part where Hologram Rick turned into the monster that they would end up killing, it just seemed a little confusing to me because the way that the episode is built up and the way that the episode is paced, you'd expect that the big thing at the end would have to do more with Morty or would have to do with Rick hopping dimensions. It wouldn't have to do with Hologram Rick. Number 4.
Okay, I know this is gonna get a lot of flack from a lot of people, but my number 4 is the old man in the seat. And I'm just gonna come out and say right now why I do not like the old man in the seat, and that's because I just don't think Rick and Morty can pull off emotional episodes anymore. And the reasoning behind that is they're constantly throwing in your face that there's these infinite realities where anything is possible and anything can happen. And they even bring it up in this episode too, so it's not like, oh, you know, they didn't say it this episode, so, you know, you can't really count it. They do say it, do bring it up, so it's not like something that could just be forgotten for this episode.
I think I love you.
Me too.
Hi, I'm my underage daughter's mother. Nice to... Whoa! Come on! Just met!
And now we have an emotional episode where it's about a character that we were just introduced to, not even the entirety of the episode, but halfway into the episode, that had no previous historical connection with Rick or any of the main characters at all. It just seems weird that Rick is taking his death so sad, like he's very sad about Tony's death. One could argue that Rick is upset that he kind of lost this, I don't want to say pissing contest, but this kind of sort of back-to-back they had with Tony, where Tony dying means that he lost.
There he is! There's our guy! Congrats, Tony! Have fun with your stupid toilet that you get to use all by yourself now. Enjoy using it all by yourself while you sit there and think about how nobody wants to be around you and how you ruined it for yourself because you're a huge piece of shit.
He's literally buried his own body before. When Bird Person died at the end of season 2, you didn't see him getting super duper upset. You know, you could argue they were in the middle of a gun battle, and I'm just thinking this character, this guy Tony, that we were never introduced to, that we just have no connection with at all, he dies. They pull this emotional card on us, and are we supposed to feel bad? Because I can't feel bad anymore.
I don't know when the other shoe's gonna drop, but this is working pretty good so far.
For me, the 4th best would be One Crew over the Crew's Morty. So I understand what this episode is trying to do. They start off the episode a Morty-led adventure. They find this tomb. They were trying to catch something, but unfortunately another character that we would end up meeting, who is actually in the icon here, would be the one to capture it. It's really hard because a lot of episodes and a lot of shows are really starting to blend these together. So whether it's a parody or a satire or a commentary on the whole heist genre, it talks about the heist genre. And I feel like while it does this concept a lot better than when other people talk about heists and sort of the tangential things such as spies or the plot twists or the double twists and the twists and turns, I feel like it does it a lot better, but it's still riddled with a lot of stuff that I personally didn't enjoy.
Welcome to Nightly's 9.
Oh, Rick, for real?
Yeah, you got that skull, buddy?
What? How?
It really wants to let you know the whole heist genre is a bit silly. However, the way that they go on to explain this and communicate this idea is with this just barrage of the same joke fundamentally. Whether it is, this didn't really happen, it was actually a plot twist for this, or it kind of goes back and it shows that while you thought this happened, actually this is what this happened. And while I understand that that's what the genre entails, I honestly feel like the episode had a lot more potential, considering that A, this is a 22-minute episode, and B, there's a lot more that goes to heist. In fact, I enjoyed the part where they were trying to get into HeistCon and they couldn't. I found that to be a pretty funny part. However, there were other parts such as just finding the crew and then having the crew double turn them, or even towards the end with Morty pitching a Netflix sort of deal. I personally kind of found that to be quite on the nose. I didn't necessarily find that to be as funny as many other people probably might, because, oh, it's Netflix.
I'm starting to think heists are just really dumb now, you know? I can't put my finger on why, but I'd really like to go.
One thing I will say about this episode that puts it ahead of Edge of Morty, at least this episode isn't trying to use a whole bunch of things that it thinks that it would pander to make me laugh. This was a more creative concept to me than having Hologram Rick use identity issues, so I would definitely put this above number 5.
I'm gonna play Minecraft.
Oh, my kids play that.
I don't like these little jabs you get in, Elon.
Number 3.
Okay, in regards to number 3, I actually had something different at first, but then I went back and forth with myself again. And after rewatching them again for this video, I'm like, okay, this was number 3, but now this is number 3. And my number 3 now is Claw and Hoarder Special Victims Morty. And there is a lot, like I said, I was going back and forth. I did like this episode a lot. I know some people had a few problems with this episode, which I'll get to later on. There was this overall sense of whimsy to it, but the dark kind of brewed up whimsy that Rick and Morty is very well known for. There were a few things I had a problem with. I thought Morty's attitude in the beginning of this was especially annoying. The dragon, who I'm not even going to bother because I've called him Bartholomew many times, so I'm just going to call him the dragon. I really enjoyed the dragon's attitude. He was either laid back or he was constantly annoyed.
What do you want to do?
I want to enter my lair and sleep upon my hoard until the age of man expires.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed that back and forth. I like how he acted towards Morty. I like how he acted towards Rick. I love the references with the loot. There was the Duckman lunchbox, the Funko Pops. There was a lot of like these cool references to these really hard to get things that, you know, as someone who really does like that kind of stuff, that really spoke to me. Another fun behind the scenes thing is that when they were soul bonding towards the very end of the episode, they drew it in a way where they described it as Muppets going crazy. There are good subplots and there are bad subplots, but they're rememberable. They have memory.
So then why are you talking?
Why should that matter?
Why should it not matter? How do I know I'm not hallucinating?
I don't think I'm gonna remember this subplot. In fact, I didn't remember this subplot until I rewatched these episodes for this video. I just thought it was there to fill time. So overall, I did enjoy this episode. There are a few parts I didn't like. This is the point where I'd say I didn't not like the episodes. The rest of these episodes, including this one, I even did like The Old Man in the Seat, but this one and the remaining ones, I definitely enjoyed, even with the later ones being probably up there with some of my favorites.
You ever like try to swallow a really big vitamin with no water? You know, like really like big one, you know, and it kind of gets stuck in your throat.
Through hearing you, I actually ended up switching my number 2 and number 3, and I'll explain a little bit why. Unfortunately, in a plot twist, I actually have the same, and I'm gonna explain why. So this will become a lot clearer when I explain number 2, but when listening to you and listening to your other sort of criticisms here and things that you noted about the episode. One thing that separates this from number 2 is actually the B plot that they have here with Jerry and the talking cat. While I personally don't really enjoy Jerry's character all that much in a lot of the later episodes post that big Beth and Jerry fight, for example, in Edge of Tomorrow towards the end where Jerry was getting on Rick's case, I just didn't really like that part at all, but I understand why it had to be there. With the whole talking cat thing, while I do find it to be a little bit more funnier than you probably did, there's actually parts about it that, now thinking about it, I wouldn't be able to justify it and label it as my second favorite.
Sorry to interrupt, guys. Just want to clarify, are these real sex positions? Because if they are, how are they gratifying to the male at all? And if the goal is to make something up, why not make up something funnier?
So it all comes down to 2 things. The first part is the fact that the cat actively does not want you to explore where it came from, its origins. We don't necessarily know what the cat is supposed to represent, and that would be fine in and of itself. I really do want to make that clear. That would be fine, except for the second reason why I didn't really like this subplot is the cop-out at the end. So to see him get thrown away like that, I was a little bit conflicted, because while I didn't like the cat, I can't understand if something is so gross you don't want to see it, and that would cause the cat to say, don't ask about where it came from. However, to have the first half of this episode, or really the first 3/4 of this episode, actively rejecting you exploring what the cat is supposed to represent, and then having the last 4th of the episode lead up to this big punchline that you cannot see, yeah, it kind of just seems like a waste, especially because you can have Jerry go to Florida without the cat, and that can be interesting by itself.
I don't think we should forget. Not this. Someone has to remember.
Someone will.
But then getting to the dragon thing, I actually want to separate the dragon part into 2 parts as well. So it primarily explores 3 things, but you know what? Let's get the first thing out of the way, because it doesn't have to do with the latter 2. So the dragon and Morty sort of bond at the beginning. I actually did enjoy that. I enjoyed that Morty can go back into, innocent things. It's not like that one episode where he gets a robot in which he fornicates with to the point where he has a baby. When he's with his dragon versus Morty when he was with Morty Jr., I actually prefer that. At least with that episode, I feel like you get a better Morty performance. With this, it's pretty clear that while Morty was supposed to be prominent in that part of the plot, he wasn't necessarily supposed to be the star. It was just a part that leads into the next 2 parts, which is the dragon and Rick bonding, and then the last part, which is meeting the other dragons and beings that are basically classified as the lowest of the low because of their sex drive. While I enjoyed the dragon bonding with Rick part, I didn't necessarily enjoy that last part, only because I feel like, again, it trends into that territory that Hologram Rick did, where of course there's going to be like this sort of species that does that. I feel like it kind of panders towards that audience, that it's not necessarily lowbrow humor, but it's definitely humor that you would expect from Rick and Morty if they were going through seasonal rot, if they were going through a period in which they didn't have any ideas. You wouldn't expect this to be the best idea they had on the table.
You know what shy pooping is, Rick? It's a pointless bid for control. You want to take the one part of life that you truly think is yours, and you want to protect it from a universe that takes whatever it wants.
Number 2.
My number 2 pick is One Crew Over the Crew Cruise Morty. The Crew Cruise Morty, not Crew. It's really not that hard to explain why I like it. I just love it. I just really enjoy it when they're doing these random whatever they kind of want thing. I see that in One Crew Over the Crew Cruise Morty. Funnily enough, it's the first episode of the season where Rick and Morty are actually together. It's so weird that it took 2 episodes for them to like have an episode where they're together for the majority of the episode. You could argue that again in Edge of Tomorrow, Hollow Rick kind of filled in for that, but again, he acted much differently than normal Rick would. So I don't really count that. I'm a sucker for heist movies. I just love them because of how convoluted they are, and I just think that they really captured that in this episode. In the very beginning, it was like one line. It was throwaway, but it was getting Elon Musk to voice Elon Tusk was amazing, even given the fact that they're constantly throwing jabs at Musk constantly. Just made it all the better, just because with a show as popular as Rick and Morty, because you see with South Park, they're constantly making fun of celebrities, but they hardly ever get the celebrity to cameo themselves, and then you get Elon Musk playing this version of himself that's the same, just with Tusk, and they're throwing jabs at him, and I'm just like, this is great, this is hilarious. I'm so glad that they were able to do this.
Let's talk over here. How serious is the situation?
Incredibly serious, and every minute counts.
In that case, I'm sorry I made you move over here for no reason.
Well, yeah.
Weirdly enough, I don't remember if this happened in any other episode, but there were no subplots in this episode at all. Like, none. You could argue the Netflix thing was a subplot, but it really wasn't.
Yeah, I wouldn't count that. Because it just happens at the end of the episode, and that's it.
It was a different approach, and I appreciated the approach they took. The music was amazing, like I said. I really did enjoy the music for this episode. I really enjoyed, like I said, I enjoyed the characters. I had a personal connection to Ventriloquiver. I guess the one problem I did have with this episode was Mr. Poopy Butthole. The reason I had a big problem with it was it just kind of felt like he was thrown in there just to be like, oh, we didn't forget about this character. We know he's a fan favorite. We're just gonna throw him into this episode. But it didn't really feel earned. I understand it was random, and that's supposed to be the point, but at the same time, it just feels like he was there because it's like, oh, this is a character that we all know and love. I really enjoyed its random, satirical look at heist movies. They're stupid and convoluted. This episode was stupid and convoluted. That's the point, and that's what I enjoyed about it.
I've been expecting you, Rick.
But not like this, right?
It hardly matters.
Oh yeah? Does this?
Even though I know what your number one episode is, my number one episode may be surprising to many of you. My second favorite actually is this one right here. Rattle Star, Rick Lactia. And I'm gonna explain a little bit why. At first I was gonna have this as being the third, mainly because while I did enjoy the snake aspect a lot, initially I kind of thought that the Jerry plot lagged a little bit, but then when I actually thought about what the third episode sort of A plot was, I definitely enjoyed this one a lot more, and I'm sure you would agree. So the snake aspect of basically having this space snake bite Morty's leg, I'm assuming around his ankle area, and dying, and Morty feeling such a great need to get a random snake, to the subtlety of trying to get the markings correct on that snake and releasing that snake back onto its world. That, to me, I just felt like that was an awesome moment, especially because in the midst of all of the, you know, I guess you would call it snake racism, and also snake jazz, which was it's amazing. If you want to talk about music, even though it's not technically music, snake jazz, that's one of the most memorable parts of the episode to me. When we think about the conventional alien, we think about a being that is not from here, most likely dropping from outer space. And that's technically what happened here. However, this alien looks pretty similar to all the other snakes. So it really plays around with the idea of what an alien is.
If I survive, it'll be without you. And if I die, it'll be on your ass. Merry Christmas, bitch!
Even though this Jerry plot mainly had to do with Jerry by himself, bouncing off of people who wouldn't necessarily stay with him throughout the entire subplot, the way that at least with the third one, you had Jerry and a talking cat, where you could focus more on the talking cat and what the cat is doing, whereas here you kind of are stuck with Jerry and Jerry wanting to fix things by himself and whatnot. At least here, I can point to the boulder joke, for example, where I really enjoyed the fact that you just have Jerry in this bar and he has to hold on to the boulder, and yes, as a viewer you're probably like shouting in your head that he has to keep the boulder, but if you just see a random guy just start to float in a bar, especially in a bar like that where I'm pretty sure tensions were already high, you see a whole bunch of like buff dudes in there, they're most likely not going to react to it in a certain way. This episode plays a lot with dialogue as well. There's a lot of moments where it's just the snakes, so you just hear a lot of hissing and a lot of sounds. The episode does a great job in putting in a lot of effort to make you understand what's going on, even though there isn't a lot of English words during the snake exclusive scenes. And this is where I think the references sort of thing comes along, to where you talked a lot about how you personally enjoy the heist aspect a lot, and this is going to be a point I'm going to bring up again with number one. I think here, because of the fact that it has these snakes sort of, we're peering into this snake world and we're seeing how they live their own life, I think that lended itself naturally to either playing it straight and not having any references, and having references. And I do appreciate that they went down the reference line. If I could put two entries on my of the same show on my best of 2019 list, this would definitely be up there, because the snake aspect in and of itself was probably the best concept of season 4 so far.
What up, homies? Shooting hoops, I see. Hey, who's interested in a friendly bet that this white guy can jump?
But let's talk about your number one, which is the same as my number 2.
Okay, yeah, so it's pretty obvious what my number 1 is. It's pretty obvious what my number 1 is Rattle Star Rick Lactica. I mean, it's basically for a lot of the same reasons that you mentioned. Snake Jazz was an amazing thing that I didn't know I needed in my life until they kind of just mentioned it, and then they just kind of kept bringing it back one way or another, and I never got annoying, and I just enjoyed it every time that they talked about it. And hearing about it behind the scenes through the podcast and listening to the artist's idea of it, like, oh, you know, when we were making the Snake Jazz music, we just thought, okay, it's just the hi-hat, and that's the entire song, because the hi-hat sounds like the hissing. There was something that clicked in me that made me enjoy the episode even more. That whole 3 or 4 minutes of no dialogue and just hissing, that wasn't originally going to be in there. I think they said they were going to do some sort of like English or subtitles or something, but that absolutely added to it. I definitely think that it was a risky move. It could have drawn off a lot of people. It was a move that I think absolutely paid off, because even though you don't understand what they're saying, you can understand what is going on through the actions and the attire of these snakes. You can understand the scenes that are going on. One of the big rules of Rick and Morty, they don't bring this up in universe a lot. In fact, this is more of a behind the scenes thing. I think they bring it up like once or twice in the show, is they're very, very, very against time travel in this show. They really hate the idea of time travel.
Hey, assholes. You. Takes one to know one.
What the heck? Hey, man, you okay? You know what? You. What? Screw you.
Here. Come on, was it really that hard? What do you think?
So them kind of breaking their own rule of no time travel for this episode, I thought, okay, that doesn't seem like the best idea. But then the way that they did it really paid off in the end. I think a lot of people can agree that the worst of Jerry comes out when it's a Jerry and Beth plot, because those two just do not have a good chemistry at all in my eyes, and them not having any subplots or really any plots at all this season so far is the best move they could have taken, because they probably saw that people were not liking them together, so they're just like, you know what, screw it, we'll have them be with Summer, or we'll have him be with someone else and have her be with someone else, or have them be on their own. That was a great idea. But in Rick and Morty, it's a convoluted mess that works and then some, and that's why I love this episode. It's my favorite. And that's all I have to say.
You a smart snake, huh? You using tools now, huh?
Those tools gonna turn into you manipulating the fabric of shit. Get over here, motherfucker. I think you do.
Your fourth favorite? My first favorite. The old man in the seat. I actually, just from looking over my notes for this, I actually have to make a video on this. There's no way. There's so much to talk about. So let's separate it between the dynamic of Rick and Tony and the app. So let's talk about the app first, because that's the part that I want to save the best for last. So This episode actually features Jerry in an interesting position because he's with Morty throughout a lot of that subplot. So in the beginning, you have Jerry being Jerry and developing the app, not because he feels like the app is that important, but because of all the reasons that Jerry does whatever he does. He personally wants to attach himself to something greater because he feels like he should be that important. And that's kind of the thing that Jerry does a lot. It's the reason why he didn't accept Rick's help in front of Beth, or when he froze Beth to talk to Rick man to man. It's just because Jerry just thinks of himself so highly, even though all of the actions and reactions in this series say otherwise for the most part. But let's get to my favorite part, and my favorite part of season 4 in general. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying about your second pick. You like heist movies, so before you went into that episode, you already liked heist movies. So seeing the execution of the episode, because obviously you're not just gonna blindly like any heist episode, but seeing the execution of it and the fact that it already aligns with your previous interests, it was just a match. It was just a perfect combination, a match made in heaven.
I have 800,000 kids.
Don't forget your voicemail.
You have 470,000 messages.
Oh, that's half of them. Okay, what do you want?
To me, I enjoyed the dynamic that Rick and Tony had, where at first, Rick is this cold being in which he doesn't want to emote at all, and he just wants to be just this badass. In fact, speaking of that, towards the beginning, that whole I think that just screams Rick's aesthetic of him just in his personal forest world, which was beautiful, by the way, and just stopping, seeing the broken branch, and just going through all of these different aspects of scanning it, finding this animal, going through all these technological ways of trying to figure out who it is and reverse engineering it back to Tony. I think that right there is Rick's aesthetic. But that whole dynamic between the two of them, Rick and Tony, I would not mind if that happened again, even if it doesn't happen with Tony. I personally found it to me, it just brought out the human in Rick, because a lot of episodes, Rick is uncaring. And while I do appreciate the fact that Rick is uncaring, sometimes to me, it's kind of like a horseshoe. While I do enjoy seeing one aspect of a certain character, if you can make an episode in which you flip the script and it works out well, I might just appreciate that episode a lot because of the fact that it didn't do what it normally does. I honestly found it to be like the most entertaining thing of that episode, and to me it just sealed the deal that is my favorite episode. I definitely got to talk about it. Definitely, guys, I'd love to hear what your guys' rankings are. Let me know in the comments down below. Also, make sure to check out Dan. I'll have his links both in the description, but also in the pinned comment. If you guys want to see more tier lists, also let me know. And until then, guys, take care. Alpha out.